Every human alive on Earth right now, every face, in every crowd, every stranger you have ever passed on the street, every person sleeping in cities you will never visit, descends from the same small group. Not metaphorically, not in some poetic sense, literally. Somewhere in our deep past, our species was reduced to a population so small it would barely fill a modern village. A few thousand people, maybe fewer. And from that group, from those survivors, came everyone. Every nation, every language, every culture, every person you have ever loved or fought or feared. All of us, all 8 billion. We come from the same handful of ancestors who somehow lived long enough to have children. There was a moment when humans almost stopped existing. We do not know exactly when. We do not know exactly why. We do not even know if it happened once or several times. But the evidence is buried in every human body alive today, including yours. It is a strange thing to learn that our species came that close to ending. Strange because we feel permanent. We have cities, machines, satellites, billions of people, an entire planet shaped by our hands. It feels impossible that humans were ever rare, but for most of our existence, we were rare. We were small. We were vulnerable. And there were moments when the line between extinction and survival was thinner than a single bad winter. This is the story of those moments. What we think happened, what we still cannot explain, and what it means that you are alive at all. The first clue is in your own DNA. Compared to almost any other animal of our size, humans are strangely similar to each other. If you take two random chimpanzees from a single forest in Central Africa, those two chimpanzees may have more genetic variation between them than any two humans drawn from anywhere on Earth. Two strangers from opposite sides of the planet. Two people who look nothing alike. They are more genetically similar than two chimps living in the same troop. That is not normal. That is not what you would expect from a species spread across every continent. A species this widespread, this old, should be more genetically diverse. Other apes are. Other great apes have lived in much smaller ranges for much shorter periods, and they still have more variation than we do. Something narrowed us. In biology, when a population suddenly shrinks to a small group and then expands again, the survivors carry only a fraction of the original genetic diversity. Whatever variation existed before the crash is mostly gone. Whatever the survivors had, that is what gets passed forward. The whole future of the species runs through that bottleneck, and our DNA looks like that. It looks like the DNA of a species that almost ended and then came back. For decades, scientists have tried to figure out when this happened. The first big suspect is one of the most violent events in recent Earth history. Around 74,000 years ago, a mountain exploded. On the island of Sumatra, in what is now Indonesia, the Toba volcano erupted. It was not a normal eruption. It was a super eruption, one of the largest known volcanic events of the last 2 million years. It threw thousands of cubic kilometers of ash and gas into the atmosphere. The plume reached far across Asia. Layers of Toba ash have been found in India, in the Arabian Sea, in the South China Sea, thousands of kilometers from the source. For years, researchers proposed that the eruption caused a global catastrophe, a volcanic winter, sunlight dimmed by ash in the upper atmosphere, temperatures dropping for years, plants dying, animals dying, food chains collapsing, and humans scattered across Africa and parts of Asia, starving in the cold and the dark. If that hypothesis is correct, our species was crushed, reduced to maybe a few thousand reproducing individuals clinging on in small pockets, mostly somewhere in Africa, while the rest died. The timeline seemed to match. The genetic bottleneck looked like it could line up with Toba. It was a clean story. A volcano nearly ended us. But cleaner stories often turn out to be wrong, because when researchers looked harder, the picture started to crack. Some studies of the climate after Toba suggested the volcanic winter was real, but shorter and less severe than first thought. Other ancient human and animal populations seem to have come through it without collapsing. In some sites, life continues right through the ash layer, as if nothing unusual happened. People still made tools. Animals still moved through the landscape. The world bent. It did not break. Maybe Toba hurt us. Maybe it was part of the pressure. But it does not look strong enough on its own to explain everything. So if it was not just one volcano, what was it? The honest answer is that scientists still argue about this. Some think the bottleneck was shallow and gradual, a slow shrinking of our population during a particularly hard stretch of climate. Others think there were several bottlenecks, separated by tens of thousands of years. Others think the bottleneck signal in our DNA may come from something much, much older than Toba. And that is where the story gets stranger. In 2023, researchers proposed that humans almost ended long before Toba ever erupted. A team studying the genomes of modern people developed a new method to look back further in time than older techniques allowed. The signal they found was disturbing. It suggested that somewhere around 900,000 years ago, the ancestors of modern humans went through a crash, not a small one. According to their model, the breeding population may have dropped to around 1,300 individuals, 1,300 people, for more than 100,000 years. If that is true, our ancestors were not a species that occasionally got into trouble and recovered. They were a species teetering on the edge for longer than recorded history has existed. A small, scattered, struggling population, somewhere in Africa, surviving generation after generation in numbers that would put any animal today on the endangered species list. This research is still being tested. Not every scientist agrees with the method. Some think the signal might be an artifact of how the model works. Others think it might be real, but more complicated. The argument is still happening. But if it holds up, the picture of our deep past changes completely. We were not always the dominant ape. There was a stretch where we were barely an ape at all. A thin thread of humans, almost invisible, almost gone. And from that thread, eventually, came us. Try to imagine what that life looked like. You are part of a group of maybe a few dozen people. Beyond your group, there may be another group somewhere over the next hills, or there may not. You will live and die without knowing for sure. Your entire world is the people you can see, the animals you can hunt, the water you can find, the fire you can keep alive. You do not know that your group is one of the only groups left. You do not know the world used to have more of you. You only know that life is hard, that winters are dangerous, that births are dangerous, that wounds are dangerous, that almost everything is dangerous. A bad year kills children. A worse year kills mothers. A run of bad years can erase a group entirely. There are no records. There is no way for anyone in the future to know they ever existed. They simply stop, and the land swallows their bones. For tens of thousands of years, this is what being human meant. Not cities, not stories around a fire that lasted forever, not history. Just survival inside a world that did not need you to survive. The wind did not care. The cold did not care. The other animals did not care. You were rare, and the planet was indifferent. And somehow, against all of that, your direct ancestors found enough food, found enough mates, raised enough children, lived just long enough to pass life forward. Every single one of them, without a break. Not one ancestor in your direct line failed, because if any of them had failed, you would not exist. That is not a poetic statement. That is just math. Every person watching this is the endpoint of an unbroken chain of survivors going back to the bottleneck and beyond. Through every famine, every disease, every freezing night, every dangerous birth, every predator, every accident, the chain held. Most of the chains around them did not hold. Most of the lines broke. Most of the names we will never know. This is the uncomfortable part of the story. The reason humans look so similar to each other today is not that we have always been a successful species. It is that we are descended from the survivors of something that killed almost everyone else. The branches that did not survive are gone. The variations that did not pass through are gone. We carry only what came through the narrow door. And that door was narrow. Maybe a few thousand people. Maybe, at the deepest crisis, just over 1,000. The genetic memory of that crash is in every cell of your body. The reason a person in Lagos and a person in Tokyo and a person in Buenos Aires share so much of their genome is because, deep in the past, we were almost erased together. There is something humbling in that. The idea of races, the idea of nations, the idea that any group of humans is fundamentally different from any other group looks very small against this background. We are all cousins, coming through the same door. Some of us walked further afterward. Some of us stayed closer to home. But we passed through the same crisis. The other humans, the Neanderthals, the Denisovans, the small island people, did not make it through their own narrow doors. We did, barely. And that should leave us with a question, not an answer. Why did our line survive when so many other human lines did not? The truth is, we do not know. Luck is part of it. Geography is part of it. The ability to move, to share knowledge, to form larger and larger networks of cooperation may be part of it. But we should be careful with explanations that make us sound destined. Destiny is something you can only see in the rearview mirror. From the front seat, it just looks like a few thousand cold, hungry, frightened people doing their best to make it to spring. They did not know they were the future of a species. They did not know the world would one day be full of their descendants. They were not trying to give us cities, or art, or science, or anything. They were trying to live long enough to have children. That is what your ancestors were doing. All of them, through every bottleneck, for hundreds of thousands of years. And here is the part that should make us a little quieter. We came close to extinction more than once, maybe more times than we have detected, and not because we were weak, not because we deserved it. Just because being a species on Earth is harder than it looks. The planet does not promise survival to anyone. It did not promise it to Homo erectus, who lasted over 1 million years and still vanished. It did not promise it to the Neanderthals, who survived ice ages we would not have survived without their cousins. It did not promise it to any of the other human species that walked here before us. It does not promise it to us either. The bottleneck was not the last dangerous moment for our species. It was just the most recent one we can clearly see in our DNA. There may be more ahead: climate, disease, conflict, things we have not yet imagined. The fact that we are 8 billion does not protect us from history. Large populations can collapse. Long-lasting species can end. We have evidence of that everywhere. The clock of our species has come close to stopping before. It came close in a way that we still cannot fully explain. And the only reason any of us are here to think about it is that somewhere, in a small group of people whose names are gone, the clock kept ticking. If they had failed, the planet would have gone on without us. There would still be sunrises. There would still be oceans. There would still be other living things. There just would not be anyone here to notice. No questions, no words, no memory of what we were. We are the species that almost did not happen. And that, more than anything else, is the secret hiding inside every human body alive today. If you want more videos like this, subscribe now. There is a lot more buried in being human.